Welcome. We are going to take a quick look today at how to use Microsoft Word to create effective resumes and cover letters without falling into the trap of using templates. Templates in Word can be very alluring. They usually have very fun graphics, often cool colors, often more exciting fonts than we're used to. But keep in mind that the goal of a resume is typically not to stand out in that way. We want to have our qualifications stand out. We want to use effective language with keywords that are specific to the industry that you are seeking a job in both the resume and the cover letter. We want to use the latest resume style, which can sometimes be difficult to determine because, let's face it, things change, preferences change. And sometimes, even if the preferences have changed, you may be writing to someone who has not changed with the times. So having a standard resume that is going to be acceptable across a broad range of expectations is always a good idea. The other side of using Word and keeping it super simple is the fact that often with resumes and even with cover letters, we are asked to place the information into internet boxes rather than being able to upload a document or to send in a document by good old snail mail. So in reality, having a super simple, non-formatted version of your resume is probably a good idea. The resumes that we're going to create and the cover letters that we're going to create for ENC 2210 will be things that you could print out on good resume paper and mail in. They can also be uploaded. And they're simple enough to where if you go to copy and paste information, it's probably going to stay fairly straightforward. So with that, I'm going to stop my video and share only Microsoft Word because I want you to be able to see it as well as good as possible. So what I have in front of you, of course, is a blank document in Microsoft Word. And we want to use standardized business letter format for the cover letter. You have practiced with that previously in ENC 2210. But just as a reminder, typically we're going to have a header that includes our name and contact information. The cool thing is if we want to keep both of these documents in the same document, that's not the right word, but we can do that. We can have one Word document that contains both the cover letter and the resume for a particular position that we're applying for. Now, realistically, you probably want to have your resume in a document all by itself. You might want to even have every cover letter you do in separate documents because the resume typically changes very little, but the cover letter can change very radically depending on the job for which you are applying. But I'm going to put both of them in this document simply to show you in one fell swoop what this could look like. I am going to stick with the standard font, mostly the standard size that's already in the default. I'm going to use single spacing and I'm going to keep my margins at 1 inch again, using the default. So I'm not going to do a lot of fancy formatting. Bold or italics for headings can be used. You can use the headings in Word, which we've talked about and demonstrated before. But with a cover letter, you want to keep it as with the cover letter and the resume, you want to keep them in Word as simple as they possibly can be. So let's start with a header. We are going to put a header so that the name and contact information is towards the top of the page. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to make sure I'm in plain single spacing. Okay, single line spacing options, everything's at 0. Okay, so I'm in single spacing and I'm going to insert a header. I want it to be blank, and I'm not going to use all 3 columns. So I'm just going to start with the one that's over on the left margin, but I'm going to change this on the home page to be centered. Okay. So I'm going to type the name and the address information. Now, one of the interesting things that I have seen in a lot of advice areas right now is to not use a street address. I just find it weird. So I'm going to include a street address here, but if you want to do the latest fashion in cover letters and resumes, you certainly do not have to use a street address. I would include an email address, and you probably want to have something very generic. Because you definitely don't want to have dirty jokes in your email, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a good idea to have a separate email that is just for job searching, because it's going to simplify your life down the road. I would also include, and I would not make this a link because they're probably not going to get this version electronically. No. Now I have to close my mail. Excuse me. I'm having all kinds of fall allergy trouble. All right, undo hyperlink. All right, so then we have the phone number. And that's it. Now there's an extra space here. I can delete that. You don't have to delete it, but you certainly can. The other thing you may want to do, because on a resume, typically the name stands out. So let's make that bold, and let's make that 16. Let's make it 18. If her name was longer, we would probably make it a little bit smaller, but you do want to emphasize the name. The other thing you can do is make this smaller than you would normally have it. So it really highlights the name again and you don't take up a lot of room with somewhat unnecessary information. All right, so we're going to type in the date. Let's just use today's date. I'm typing this on October 25th. And you will have a full address for a potential employer. I'm going to use Lake Sumter State College, except I can't spell. Now, one of the things I'm not going to worry too much about in this demo, and I don't necessarily expect you guys to worry too much about it in this assignment, but when we address a cover letter, you really want to do some digging and find the particular person that's going to be hiring for this position. I'm going to use the one of the dean's names. Oops. Dear Dr. Terranova, because she would be a person who might be hiring for a position. So notice I'm using the traditional business letter format with the colon and all that. And then I'm going to have my cover letter here. Typically, and I'm not going to type one out for real, but I'm going to put in here, usually in the first paragraph, you'll introduce yourself and talk about the position for which you are applying. And then in a second paragraph, we typically detail how we are qualified for this position. Use phrasing from a job advertisement as much as possible to match what they said they want. Another potential thing that we do, and I forgot to mention this in the first paragraph, is to talk about why you want to work for this particular employer and what you know of their reputation. And if you don't know anything, you need to do some research. Very short third paragraph. Is usually just, please call me for an interview. Thank them for their time. Ask for an interview. It's a business letter, so we sign it sincerely and we leave room for a real signature and we put our name. Now, with this particular setup, you notice it is very, it wants to cramp my style. I'm not going to let it. This is one page, and this is not even filling a page. Now, we would typically have a pretty full page here by the time we really write these paragraphs out. So just notice that it should be one page. Your resumes should also only be one page. I don't care what anybody else has told you. Your resumes need to be a single page. So we're going to insert a page break. Now, one of the benefits of using Word and keeping them in the same document is now I have consistency in my header. With a resume, you're going to need to decide, and we've had some materials on these already. You're going to need to decide whether a regular old traditional reverse chronological resume is correct for you or a skills-based resume, functional resume. I'm going to set this up in regular format for a chronological resume because using the headings and creating the information is similar no matter which style you're using. So this will be easy enough to use for a functional resume as well. With a resume, there are several things that you want to do, and there are several things that you do not want to do. For sure, it is outdated to put an objective statement. It is also not only outdated, but totally unnecessary to put a references available upon request at the bottom. Looking at sample resumes online is a great way to think about what you might need to include in terms of the sections. However, you will see resumes with sections that are inappropriate or definitely inappropriate for your chosen industry. If you see resume samples that have a lot of graphics, and especially if they have a photo, unless you're in real estate, typically that is considered a no-no. So you want to have headings, subheadings, whatever you want to call them, for each of your sections. You want them to be consistent in terms of font and size and punctuation. So we're going to use the really old traditional kind of stuff. The first thing we're going to start with, and I'm going to bold. I'm just going to use bold for my headings. Instead of having an objective statement, if you really want to have something, you can call it a summary of qualifications. But remember, it needs to focus on skills. Think of this as a skills section. And you really don't have to have this section at all. Typically, when people do have the section, it's going to be either, and I'm just going to make a little fake version here. It's going to be a little paragraph in narrative form, or you can use a list of skills. I'm just going to leave this in narrative form because it will show a little bit more how we want to make sure that we use the whole page. Especially if we don't have a lot of job history, we can do things to make it full. Next section I'm going to include is going to be education. Now, if you have a lot of work history, especially work history that is relevant to the job for which you are applying, then you probably want to put work history above education. But for most of you, you are applying for jobs that are relevant to the education that you're in right now or that you're about to finish. So education makes all the sense in the world to have at the top in those situations. So with both education and with work history, I'm going to show you a little trick about how to use the space, utilize the space. So we're going to put, we're just going to make up something here. University of Central Florida. That would be in Orlando, Florida. And let's say the dates of attendance were 2016 to 2022. Okay. Or no, let's make it 2021 so we're not currently a student. Now, you could currently be a student, and that's certainly fine. If you are currently a student, in fact, let's do that. Let's do present so that we can see what it looks like. All right. The next thing you want to do below that for education is typically you're going to name the degree. So let's say we are working on a bachelor's in Bachelor of Arts in Communication. Now, there's a lot of debate as far as what else you might need to include. If your GPA is 4.0, you might want to include your GPA, but typically people don't care about your GPA, especially if your GPA is low. You definitely don't want it on there. But if you have things that are relevant to, especially relevant to the job that you're applying for, you can certainly do that. So let's say I was in a leadership club. Let's say I was a volunteer with Orange County Cares. I can't talk today, etc. Okay. Now, again, if you don't have anything there, that's certainly okay. But if you do have a list, make sure it's a list. This is going to be at the top, but right below the identifying information. So in both the education and the job portion, if you want, you can also make that stand out by formatting it. I'm going to use italics. Now, here's my big trick that I want to show you. When you want these to spread across the page, which you do because you don't want them taking up this much space, you go to layout and you choose 3 columns. Now, what we need to do is make sure that this one is centered and make sure this one is on the far left. Now, part of the problem here is that my font is a little bit big. So I'm going to change this to 11 and I'm going to change this to 11 and see. Yep, there we go. So you want to play around with the size in terms of whether it would fit or not. The other alternative, if I didn't want to do that, I could have changed this to UCF. Everybody knows what UCF is. So let's do that. Let's leave it at 12, but 12 point might be a little big. And so you may have an employer's name or something that takes up too much space. That's one way to fix it. And like I said, you got to be on the home page to make sure this one is centered and this one is on the right margin. What that does is as many of these as you need, they will all line up perfectly. Okay. So let's say we have a previous educational thing that we want to include. Do not include high school. Do not include anything before high school. But if you have previous college experience, even if you didn't graduate or whatever, you can certainly use it. So let's put in LSSC. And again, we're going to put the city, Leesburg, Florida. And let's say we attended Leesburg, Florida of LSSC from 2009 to 2011. And let's say we did get our degree and it was an associate's of arts, our AA degree. And then again, if we have something to include below that, we could put, let's put Phi Theta Kappa Honor Society. Can't spell. Let's say that's the only thing that we want to report. Okay. So we can then go back up here again and make these stretch all the way across. Same way. It's going to be centered. And this one's going to be on the left or the right. So what that does again is see how nice that lines up. Now you can play around with it depending on how much space you have. So we still have a good long way. We have our job history we're going to include. We may want to put extra spacing there and there, especially if we don't have a lot of work history. There's a lot that you can do to help with the spacing, but let's go ahead and add our work history. And we're going to do work history the exact same way. So let's say that we are currently working at, I don't know, my mind is drawing a blank. Let's say we work at Target in Orlando, Florida. And we have worked there from 2010 to present. And we are a sales associate. And this is where we're going to have our bulleted verb action word oriented list of skills. Now, it's really tempting to not use the verbs first and put excellent customer skills or things of that nature. But the current thought on resumes is action verbs. So let's say we process customer And you can be as elaborate and as long as you want with these. The main thing is you want them to be really specific, and you also want to make sure that they have some relevance to the job for which you are applying. If you have very little job experience, you're going to use it no matter what. But if you have a lot of job experience, this is how you pare it down to keep it to one page, is by only focusing on the things that are super relevant to what you're doing. I don't want to think too hard today, so I'm going to fill in the rest of my bullets with whatever. But one of the things you'll notice is that process is present tense because this is still a present job. And then if we had a past job, which let's include one more job, I'm going to copy and paste this so I can fake it. And let's say we worked at Michael's. In Lady Lake. And oh, in fact, we probably didn't go to Leesburg. Okay, so let's make this 2012 and let's make this 2010 to 2012. Okay, those make logical sense. So all we have to do now is what we did before. We're gonna do the layout and we're gonna choose 3. That worked. We're gonna put that in the middle. We're going to put this on the other edge. And then same thing with Michael's. Now, we're seeing something that happens a lot, and that is that we've not filled the page. Even with the extra spaces, we've still got some room to make some additional bullets, to do some additional qualifications. Do try to fill the page. If you are this close, you could probably leave it. But what I would do, and we need to make this past tense, what I would do is maybe add additional bullets to the current job, or think about maybe some things that you could add in education. One of the things that I see a lot that people do is relevant coursework. And then you could list the courses that are relevant to this particular position. So do what you can to fill your page, but do not go over a page. Now, if you have volunteer positions that you have done that showcase your community spirit, whatever the case may be, feel free to add those. You would treat them just like work history, but you would call them volunteer positions or something along those lines. But this, and I'm going to use the view here so you can see what it looks like as a whole. Now we have a pretty well filled out page. We're not wasting a lot of extra space. We do have additional space. So we have some, we could have used more things and fewer spaces around it. But notice that summary of qualifications, education, work history, all 3 are bold, all 3 have colons, all 3 have a space underneath them. So consistency in how you format it is in some ways as important as anything else. And that is how you format a cover letter and resume in Microsoft Word without using a template.